Every single night, while you're lying awake listening to the person next to you snore themselves half to death, or worse, while you're the one doing it, there's a tiny brown bottle sitting on a store shelf, priced at $1, that has been quietly solving this exact problem for 3,000 years. And almost nobody's talking about it. Not your doctor, not your sleep specialist. Definitely not the company renting you that clunky machine strapped to your face every night. What you're about to find out will genuinely change how you think about something that might be wrecking your sleep, your relationship, and your health, starting tonight. My name is Alex, and this channel, SecretVerse, exists for moments exactly like this. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Because what we uncover here isn't taught in medical school, it's not in mainstream media, and it absolutely is not sponsored by anyone who profits from keeping you confused. This video is going to give you something real. Stick with me. Let's start with a question that nobody in the sleep treatment world wants you to ask. If snoring is caused by a specific biological process happening inside your airway every single night, and that process can be interrupted by a natural compound that's been documented for millennia, why is the standard treatment a $2,000 machine you wear on your face forever? Why is there a $10,000 surgery being performed when a bottle of essential oil costs less than your morning coffee? The answer isn't scientific, the answer is financial, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Snoring isn't a mystery, it's not random. It happens because of two things happening simultaneously inside your throat during sleep. The first is inflammation of the mucosal tissue, the soft, moist lining inside your nasal passages in the back of your throat. When that tissue is inflamed, it swells. Swollen tissue means a narrower airway. A narrower airway means faster moving air. And faster moving air causes the soft tissue, your soft palate, your uvula, the walls of your throat, to vibrate. That vibration is the sound. That's snoring. The second cause is something called pharyngeal muscle hypotonia, which is just a technical way of saying the muscles that hold your airway open while you sleep are losing their tone and collapsing inward. When those two things happen together, inflamed tissue narrowing the passage and weakened muscles failing to hold it open, the result is a nightly symphony that your partner will tell you sounds like a chainsaw convention. Now here's where it gets interesting. The standard medical response to both of these causes is not to fix them. It's to physically force the airway open with pressure, or to mechanically reposition your jaw, or to surgically remove tissue. These approaches work by working around the problem, not through it. The moment you stop the treatment, the second that CPAP mask comes off, the same inflamed tissue, the same weak muscles, the same snoring, every night, for the rest of your life. That's not healing, that's a subscription. The herb we're talking about today doesn't manage the airway mechanically. It addresses the inflammation and muscle tone issue directly, at the biological level. And it's been doing this, documented and studied, for longer than most modern nations have existed. The plant is peppermint. Specifically, its active compound, menthol, and what menthol does inside your airway when properly applied before sleep is genuinely remarkable. Here's why this matters and why you've never heard it framed this way. When menthol makes contact with the mucous membranes inside your nose and throat, it activates specific cold-sensitive receptors called TRPM8 receptors. The activation of these receptors causes the blood vessels in the mucosal tissue to constrict, vasoconstriction. Less blood pooling in inflamed tissue means less swelling. Less swelling means a wider airway. A wider airway means air can pass through without forcing the surrounding soft tissue to vibrate. The snoring mechanism is interrupted at its source, but that's only half the story. Menthol also has a documented anti-inflammatory effect on respiratory tissue by suppressing the specific inflammatory compounds that drive chronic, low-grade throat inflammation. Not just temporarily masking them, actively reducing their activity with repeated use. This is the difference between a band-aid and actual healing. And on top of that, menthol activates the trigeminal nerve receptors running through your nasal passage. Trigeminal nerve activation has a direct stimulating effect on the pharyngeal muscles, the exact muscles that lose tone during sleep and allow airway collapse. Stimulate them before bed, and you increase their baseline resistance to that collapse. 3 separate mechanisms, one herb, $1. Ancient physicians figured this out through observation across thousands of years of clinical practice. Egyptian medical texts from around 1000 BC document peppermint preparations, specifically for respiratory and throat conditions. Greek physicians noted that patients who inhaled mint vapor showed measurable relief from airway obstruction. Ayurvedic practitioners in India cataloged mint as a primary respiratory herb with specific documented effects on breathing during sleep, and this documentation wasn't casual. It was the result of generations of patient outcomes being recorded and refined. Chinese traditional medicine classified peppermint among its most trusted respiratory herbs and prescribed it specifically for the kind of breathing disruption we now call sleep-disordered breathing. Medieval European herbalists kept these applications alive through centuries when formal medicine barely existed. Every major ancient medical tradition on Earth, independently, arrived at the same herb for the same problem. Then, in 1879, scientists isolated menthol as the active compound. The pharmaceutical industry noticed immediately, but what they noticed was the commercial potential of menthol for acute symptoms, colds, flu, sore throats. They packaged it into vapor rubs, throat lozenges, inhalers, nasal sprays. Billions in revenue. But they positioned it as a cold remedy, not a snoring solution. Because by the time the snoring market was being carved up, a different industry had already staked its claim. Medical device companies, surgical practices, sleep clinics, the infrastructure of an $80 billion annual market, built entirely on the premise that your airway problem requires professional management and expensive hardware. Peppermint oil cannot be patented. Menthol in its natural form belongs to no corporation, which means no corporation has the financial incentive to fund the large-scale clinical trials that would force peppermint onto official sleep treatment guidelines. Without those trials, it stays off the guidelines. Without guidelines, your doctor never mentions it, and without your doctor mentioning it, you stay on the CPAP machine, replacing filters and masks and chambers and paying thousands of dollars over years for a device that works by brute force while the underlying inflammation continues untreated underneath. Here's what the published research actually shows. A 2004 study in the journal Chest tested a peppermint oil-based throat spray on patients with habitual snoring. The people using the spray before sleep reported significant reductions in both snoring frequency and loudness. Their bed partners, who had no idea whether the real treatment or a placebo was being used, independently confirmed the reduction. The mechanism matched exactly what the chemistry predicts: mucosal inflammation, reduction in airway widening. A 2011 study in a European otolaryngology journal tested peppermint and eucalyptus inhalation in patients with sleep-disordered breathing. The treatment group showed measurable improvement in nasal airflow and reduced snoring intensity. The placebo group showed nothing significant. This research exists. It has been published. It is not hidden in some underground vault. It is simply inconvenient for an industry generating $80 billion a year. Now let me tell you exactly how to use this. You need 100% pure peppermint essential oil. Not a peppermint-scented product, not a blend, pure Mentha piperita oil. Check the label for menthol content. Quality oil runs between 40 and 55% menthol. A 15 milliliter bottle costs between $8 and $15 retail and will last you 60 to 90 nights of use. Your cost per night works out to roughly 10 to 20 cents. You apply it 3 ways simultaneously because each method targets a different part of the airway. For nasal application, mix 2 drops of peppermint oil into 1 teaspoon of a carrier oil. Coconut oil works perfectly. Using a clean cotton swab, apply the mixture just inside each nostril, barely past the opening. The menthol vapor will naturally travel further with each breath. Don't go deep. You're coating the nasal mucosa, so the vasoconstriction and anti-inflammatory effects can work on the nasal passage tissue that's contributing to airway narrowing. For the throat, add 2 drops of peppermint oil to a small glass of warm water and gargle for about 30 seconds, focusing on the back of your throat. Spit it out, don't swallow it. This delivers menthol directly to the soft palate and pharyngeal tissue, the primary vibrating surfaces during snoring. The anti-inflammatory effect starts working on contact. If you have a diffuser in your bedroom, add 5 drops to the water reservoir and set it to run for the first couple of hours after you fall asleep. Low-level continuous inhalation during early sleep extends the mucosal effects through the period when airway management matters most. Do all 3 consistently 30 minutes before sleep. The peak effect of menthol's vasoconstriction typically hits around 20 to 30 minutes after application, so you're timing the maximum airway widening effect to coincide with you actually falling asleep. Give it 3 full weeks. I know that feels long, but here's why it matters. The chronic mucosal inflammation driving habitual snoring has been building for months or years. It doesn't reverse in a single night. The first few nights, you'll likely notice an improvement. By the end of week 2, the cumulative anti-inflammatory effect starts producing more durable results. By week 3, most people report consistent, reliable reduction. You're not just temporarily masking the problem, you're gradually unwinding the chronic inflammation that's been maintaining it. One thing I want to be clear about: if you've been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, formally diagnosed with documented drops in blood oxygen during sleep, peppermint oil alone is not sufficient, and you should be working with your doctor. That's a different and more serious condition. What we're talking about here is primary snoring and mild sleep-disordered breathing, which affects hundreds of millions of people who are being funneled toward devices and procedures when something far simpler addresses the actual biological cause. Think about what this actually represents. Physicians across ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, India, China, and medieval Europe, all independently, arrived at the same plant for the same problem. Modern chemistry explained why it works. Modern research confirmed the mechanism. And yet somehow, in 2025, the conversation about snoring ends at, here's your CPAP machine and here's your first bill. Not because the herb failed, because the herb costs $1 and the industry costs $80 billion. That gap between what works and what gets recommended is not an accident. It's arithmetic. Every cheap, unpatentable, effective solution that falls outside the profit structure of a major industry faces the same invisible wall. Not censorship, not conspiracy, just the quiet, consistent reality that the knowledge which doesn't make anyone rich doesn't get funded, doesn't get published in guidelines, and doesn't get mentioned in clinical consultations. The knowledge survives in the margins, in natural health communities, in the patients who got fed up with devices that didn't work for them and started researching on their own. And now, in videos like this one, if this changed how you think about something as simple as why you snore every night, share this right now, not for the algorithm, because someone you know is either suffering through this themselves or sleeping next to someone who is, when they have genuinely never heard what you just learned. Drop a comment below telling me how long you or someone you know has been dealing with snoring. I read every single one. Subscribe to SecretVerse if you want to keep going deeper, because snoring is only the beginning. There are rooms full of this kind of information, and we're just getting started unlocking them.